The Breaking Through 30/30 show is sponsored by Affinitive LLC. Values and investment advice together at last. Visit us on the web at affinitive.com.
Welcome to Breaking Through Live. We are going to create a 30-day plan for Kim's business in about 30 minutes. We're praying and hoping that we get it done in 30 minutes again. And Kim, go ahead and introduce yourself. We're going to move really fast, but You're going to have about 2 minutes to introduce yourself. Then Richard and Corey and Christy and Donnie will each have a chance to ask you 2 questions, and you'll reply to them individually. And then we're going to move you into the breakout room, and we're going to create a 30-day plan for you and then bring you back, and then we'll close together. Okay.
Hi, I'm Kim Noeth. I'm a birth mom and a birth mom life coach. I placed a child for adoption many years ago when adoptions were closed. And the one thing that I did was I sent a letter with my son that the adoptive couple said that they would give him. And in the letter, I said that I would be registered in Albany. So fast forward many years later, and when my son was 17, he found the letter and he photocopied it and he put it back. And then to this day, they've never given him the letter. But when he was 23, his partner encouraged him to go online to where I said in my letter that I would be registered. So he went online and he entered his information, and all we had about each other was our birth date. And that was about it. And so here I received a phone call one day and someone said, "Did you place a little boy with blue eyes that you put in a blue outfit and placed for adoption on such and such day?" And I dropped the phone. I was sobbing. I had not been in contact with this situation in 23 years. I had always hoped that we would reconnect, but never knew for sure, especially with how closed adoptions were. So we got to meet each other. It was a great experience. And I went online to see what type of resources were out there. You know, I figured all these years later, a lot had probably changed in the adoption industry. And I was really surprised to find that that hadn't. So I started a local support group, and there was about 4 people that came. I really struggled with local groups. I found that this is a very private matter. So I went online and I created an online group. And at first there was about 5 or 6 members. And within a year, it grew rapidly. And to this day, I think we're at like 2,000 members now. And all of these women have either placed a child, and a few of them are in the decision phase. But I began to see that this was a really huge problem. And this was a classroom of 2,000 women who every day my heart would break as I kept hearing the same stories over and over again. And I decided that if there was no programs out there, then I was going to create some. So I took everything that I have ever learned, the best of everything and all my life coaching skills, and I put together a pretty comprehensive program where I addressed all the problems that a birth mom faces when she places a child, and especially the grief and the healing. I'm really passionate about that. So I went and got some more skills in grief recovery. And I began to implement all this in an online workshop where I created like modules and courses and, little places that she could come and get like a loving touch as she's going through this. And I thought that, the agencies would love this and that everybody would be, signing up for more. But that's not so. The truth is a lot of people just don't care. They think the services that they have in place are adequate. I did some surveying and pretty much that's like a yearly picnic, or it's the actual adoption caseworker that she can come back to for her aftercare. And many times that's re-traumatizing to come back to the environment that you placed a child in. And I really feel it's important for her to have someone that, understands. And so many of these women say that they've been in therapy for like 20 years and nobody gets them the way that I get, them just on one phone call. But all the work that I've been doing thus far is free because these women cannot pay for their services. Many of them are still in very bad shape 20 years later because they haven't resolved, a lot of the pain and trauma around the placement. And, so here I'm advocating for the agencies to include this in their services where, the couple either pays for that or it's part of the $30,000 that they charge this couple already. The little bit that I'm asking for her care, I would think would be so easy, but it's not. So I am here to say that I need your help. I can't make people care, but I believe that there's enough awareness around the trauma and the fact that everybody is different and we don't know how they're going to heal. We don't send people off to war and tell them that they're great. And then when they come back with PTSD, say, sorry, we can't help you. And that's how I feel it is in the adoption industry. I feel that it is a very unserviced, especially for the birth mother. She has very few rights, and even her aftercare is really neglected.
So Kim, your question for them is
How can I get agencies and adoptive parents to care enough about this service to pay for her care?
Okay. Richard, do you want to go first?
I'm really happy that you exist and you care about people
Thank
in this
you.
space. I personally know quite a few people who have been adopted or have had to put someone up for adoption, and yeah, there's a lot around that requires a lot of healing over a very long period of time. How are you set up as a business? Are you a for-profit or a non-profit?
For-profit.
For-profit. Okay. Have you tried to get your work inserted with all the relevant agencies? It sounds as though you have.
I'm not a licensed social worker. I'm a life coach, so that is a distinction there that sometimes is an obstacle.
Would they take it if you were a licensed social worker?
There might be one less complaint or resistance.
Right. Okay.
So I tried to take myself away from it and make it a program as opposed to me being a person.
And your program, is that zero touch?
No, it includes 2 one-on-one phone calls with me and the support group online.
Donnie?
I'm pretty close to this as both of my nephews are adopted, but my sister has been on the adoptive parent side. And so I know a little bit about that journey. One of the things that came to mind is as you're looking at your impact overall, like I'm thinking about your impact on the adoption industry. And that's a huge sector. So if you think about your specific impacts of what you would like to see shift within the adoption industry, what would that shift be?
More personalized care. I believe this is a lifelong decision that I have a real passion for the adoptee. And I believe that if we took away some of this stigma with how we see adoption, if adoptees heard more birth moms speaking at a young age and we normalized it more instead of calling it ADD if they have issues, I think that would be a huge shift in the narrative of how we see this very complex situation that people try to call a win-win for everybody, but it's really not.
And the second question is more for the moms on the receiving end who would work with you. What would be the ideal shift for them?
That they would know that the agency or the adoptive couple cared enough about them to invest in their aftercare so that it's not like they're just left to deal with this situation and everybody goes off to live a happy life. And now, they're stuck dealing with the trauma that, is a natural response from loss. Even the best adoptions, there's going to be grief because that's a natural response to loss.
Corey?
I can think of so many ways that you can do this thing that you're trying to do. My question is, how disruptive are you willing to be, even in terms of your own thinking? Like you've sort of hit on one thing, program, workshop, but there's so much more. I mean, are you really willing to explore everything?
And I think in ways I am very disruptive through my voice on social media. I definitely bring a element of love and try not to be offensive to anybody in anything that I bring out to provoke your thinking and to change your thinking. I do struggle with being shy and not very personality oriented. So I struggle with video, but I absolutely would be on my soapbox, and I am hugely I'm just created for this. I know that beyond a shadow of a doubt. And if I don't care, that's what I tell myself. If you're not going to care, nobody's going to care.
Okay. All right. So I love that. I love that, and that willingness and enthusiasm. Do you want this to be your life's work? Like, are you trying to make a full-time living doing this?
I've been trying for 12 years, and absolutely yes.
Have you made any money doing it so far? You said that so far you've done things for free. Have you made any money doing this?
I've made money with three paying clients, 2 that came to me on their own, and 1 that the agency just sent me yesterday.
All right, Christy, back over to you.
I think you're a superhero. So I'm just going to say that.
Thank you.
Is there so you mentioned PTSD and lifelong for these ladies. Is there any classification, like a certain way, this is a certain form of depression or anything like that, that you can get this categorized that might actually get them some help, say maybe on a government program or something like that?
I think grief is one that is widely accepted, and being it's disenfranchised grief, where the person is still alive and yet you're grieving them. I think, again, there's a huge awareness now that the agencies can't deny, thanks to the internet, that there is grief out there. And there's so many cases of PTSD as a result of this that, you know, there's enough documentation, I believe, to be gotten that there's definitely trauma that these women experience. Though nobody maybe knows how to deal with that trauma, they're definitely aware that it's there.
Okay, so this might not be on the 30-day plan, but have you thought about trying to get this certain type of depression, give it its own name, give it its own presence so that it can be recognized and then addressed?
And I think there is a title for it. I'm not prepared to remember what that is here, but I think that there might even be such a classification already established for that. And that's something I always call it post-adoption, you know, grief and trauma, but I think there might be a title out there.
Okay, so first round complete. Kim, I'm going to move you into the waiting room.
Okay.
And I will, I'll ping you a message when we're ready to bring you back in.
Thank everyone for their investment. It's so exciting for me that people care enough to even get together and brainstorm. So thank you.
Let's get started, because I personally have 1,000 ideas of how she could make this work without having to fight her way into an ancient, rigid industry that is not receptive to her. So I recognized her saying that the major obstacles that she's facing is that this is sort of an old state industry that's not interested in or doesn't believe in the women enough that they would be receptive and accountable in something like this. And then the second obstacle I heard her mention was that she doesn't have the credential that might gain her acceptance in certain areas. I think, well, the first and most obvious thing is that she can offer paid programs and also give away a lot of free content, right? She can absolutely do both, as she has seen that there are people who are willing to pay. And a lot of creators do that when they have content that they think their audience can't afford. They give all kinds of free resources to help the people that can't afford. So she can definitely have tiered offers. But in terms of targeting, I don't see why she couldn't do specific training for therapists, even though she herself does not have the credential, right? She could do continuing education units in different industries around this particular topic, and people have to pay for those trainings every year. I think she also could potentially target churches where they give away a lot of free training and counseling and things like that. I think there may be an in there where she can create paid options. I wonder if she has created a nonprofit around this work, which means that she could get grants and donations and pay herself.
I feel very strongly that she needs to create a nonprofit, that she needs to repackage this whole thing as a nonprofit.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think like a couple of things just really flashed into my mind while she was talking about what she's up against. I don't like the idea of her bashing her head up against a brick wall, trying to get anywhere with these agencies. I can just imagine what kind of organizations they are. And I'm not really feeling a great future there. I think she needs to restructure and repackage as a non-profit straight away. She needs to be producing a lot of free content. And actually, I had kind of a weird idea too. Maybe she could crowdfund sessions for mothers who have had to give up a child for adoption. So other people could pay for those sessions for those people. I think that would be a pretty appealing proposition. I'm not sure if there's one like global online community for people who've been impacted by adoption, but if there isn't, she needs to create that.
Visibility.
And all of this through that.
Richard, you said global. So I think that's a great distinction for her, is like she's been in the States doing this. And
Yeah.
I don't know how adoption is perceived globally, but are you suggesting if she looks at a higher level of this and takes it out to the meta, that there may be?
Well, as far as the internet's concerned, there's no such thing as countries. So why limit yourself?
I think as soon as she started talking, I was like, I can see you having a YouTube channel, and that's one of your educational outlets. But as been listening to you, Richard and Corey, what came to mind is I think there could potentially be 2 segments for her work. There are the moms who are going through the process of grieving and healing, and then the moms who have who are a little further down the journey, and they're in the grief recovery, but they're also looking at the joy recovery piece. So I think about her work as a spectrum. And I think it's really important to help them see, okay, so what does life look like?
That's great.
Once as you continue to move down the grief path, because then it feels like you just stopped and hit a wall, and you're like, all right, well, what's next? What's next?
Such a great point. That's such a great point.
Continue to be a guide. And she could also potentially reach out to parents who have adopted, and I'm not sure necessarily what she does with it, but build a community so that she now has these 2 communities that she can tap into and figure out how she can bring them together. Because she might learn something from the adoptive parents that could be helpful to put into her program for the parents that have just let their kids go. The other piece was specifically for Kim. My sense was that she's still doing some grief recovery work.
Yes.
And it's continuing to go a little deeper. So for her, there could be something to explore around what does restoration look like in addition to the grief recovery work. Currently talking about adoption and who recently just adopted, and that industry is like a dinosaur.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think trying to bust into it, like you all said, is going to be really difficult. But she could potentially look at partnering with different social workers and using those as her allies to potentially get some ends into the agency.
And if she was a non-profit in that sphere, I feel that would be one barrier gone. But if she's coming in as like a for-profit life coach, that's going to put a lot of people off straight away in that world. So yeah, definitely restructuring and repackaging along those lines is going to get rid of some of those barriers and probably help her do exactly what you just said.
Well, and like Donnie was saying with the 2 roads, if for people whose lives are manageable and they've moved on, there's other Kims out there. So that can be, she could have like a for-profit wing on that, or their lives are in a space where they could utilize her.
I think she needs to make some of these women that are like further down the path in the recovery that she's helped, kind of rotate them into maybe helping some of the newer mothers step up.
It's like a mentoring program.
Kind of like a training program to train these women to share this. Visibility. so that whole global thing with Richard, that's right on. That it needs to be, she needs to be more visible. People
Mm.
need to see that this is out there. I know several people that aren't aware of any kind of support in this way.
Yeah.
And that goes for the birth mother and the adoptive parents. So, and I understand that those two might not be able, this certain birth mother to these adoptive parents, but like you said, the two different groups, so they can remain anonymous. I think that's important for them, but at the same time share. Wow, you know, it's the greatest gift when a mother who thinks that she's all she needs to be for her child, and then realizes that she's not all that that child needs. And so her love is bigger and better enough to let that child go to some place it's for a better life. You know what I mean? If there is a classification for this kind of trauma, she needs to try it and peg into some resources for that.
So you guys, as I'm sitting in this conversation, I'm realizing what a big issue this is, because I don't know anyone who's ever given anyone up for adoption, but I do know two couples who have tried to adopt. And one couple wanted to adopt a set of brothers that had been in foster care. The process was so long and complicated that the brothers actually aged out without getting adopted. And yet my friend was in a couple who wanted these two boys. They were brothers and couldn't get them. And then I know a second couple, and it chokes me up. I know a second couple who tried for years to adopt, couldn't afford the process. I didn't realize adoption was so expensive, couldn't afford the process. After several years, gave up, and then ended up pregnant naturally. But so that's like a whole different side. And the other thing is, with my attorney hat on, there are so many families who lose their children into foster care, or Child Protective Services takes them. So they have also a side of grieving, which is sort of an involuntary losing of their children. So I don't know what the scope of what she does is, but here's two things that I thought about. The beauty of if she attempts to do this as a nonprofit, which I think we're kind of all seeing is a very good option for her, and she can make a good living doing it, right? Some people don't realize that you can do that.
Yeah.
She can then bring in experts, right? She can have a resident, right, to make up for the fact that she herself doesn't have the credential. She can have a resident psychologist or a resident social worker, and she could then decide, and maybe she does both, where she has a think tank side where they do research and education, but then she may also have a hands-on side where they offer some of the services that she's thinking about. One of the reasons, this is another point, let me pause here. One of the reasons that the agencies are going to be resistant to this is because everybody's afraid of litigation, risk, liability, and loss. Those are massive, massive obstacles to overcome. People's fear of risk, fear of the unknown. But as a nonprofit, one, it gives her more credibility sometimes, but it also creates a platform for all the different things that we're talking about, and it gives her the ability to bring in resident experts and researchers and stuff like that.
Just before we wrap here, just to give her some mindsets. So these would be affirmations, words, phrases, disruptive mindsets, like what Corey was speaking about earlier. What are some things you want some healthy thinking, healthy mindsets that will support her at this leg in the journey and beyond?
Think bigger.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of reach and scope.
I recently heard Tony Robbins say that the area of thinking small is highly competitive because that's where everybody is. Whereas the area of thinking big, there's nobody up there, right? So your big dreams actually have less competition because there's nobody up there.
It's not specific words yet, but the visual that just came to mind is her being the go-to, I don't know, resource, or the go-to expert on post-adoption healing.
Practices, any self-care, well-being that you want her to be mindful of? Or?
I do have something that, and it might sound a little harsh, but it's very important. It's not your job to like me, it's mine. So she needs to remember that there's got to be a lot of, once again, here we are in this forgiveness space. She's still grieving herself, so she needs to be aware of that. It's easy to pump some advice out for someone else, but to take your own advice and take your moments, take your healing when it comes. And I understand that healing others is healing, very self-healing for her as well. She's got an eye. She can identify this pain in people. So to trust her intuition on that. She's got the eye for this.
You guys, I just had a little bit of a contrarian thought, which is that maybe she should get really vocal about the fight and invite people who don't like adoptive mothers, or who don't like, not adoptive mothers, who don't like women who give their children up for adoption, invite them into a fight. And I think her allies will then identify themselves. They will join in the fight, and she will see what are the pockets of society, because that's the other piece, right? There are some people who don't feel sympathy for adoptive mothers. And I think if she got into a fight with them, her allies would begin to reveal themselves.
She needs to break the stereotypes. The stereotypical that people think when a woman gives a child up, they have this possible form in their head that this woman is on drugs, or she's this or she's that. And so really, when I say being visible, she needs to get these other mothers, all they look like all kinds of people, you know what I mean? They're so to break that stereotype.
I'm just like picturing like this, like a photo of all of the different women, all walks of life that are there that have, you know, like, shield.
Give all these ladies a voice.
It's beautiful. All right, let me just let her know I'm bringing her back in. Welcome back, Kim.
Thanks, Kate.
For the first time in Breaking Through Live 30/30 history, they have consensus on a path forward.
Yeah, I hadn't even realized that.
I need balloons, and I don't have balloons, so obviously I need more props because like just so great. Richard, would you mind doing a little summary for Kim and then we'll provide her with the document after.
Okay, well, Kim, I think we all agreed pretty strongly that the way you're trying to serve would be best packaged and structured as a nonprofit. That's going to shift the perception of the whole thing in a lot of relevant minds, and perhaps some of those agencies that you've been struggling with. I would really like to see, if there isn't already a great global online community for all facets of this issue, then that is something you really, really, really need to create, because the scope of this is huge. Not just in like the specific area of the issue that you're working with right now, but all of the facets of the issue in all of the places on earth where these things happen. So, you know, there's going to be a huge opportunity to serve in all of those different ways. The other thing that I think we all very strongly agreed on too is that there needs to be a decent amount of free, publicly available content, because there are going to be a lot of people who simply have no financial resources who need access to something that's going to help them. So that definitely needs to be a part of this.
Corey, I think one thing that might be helpful is like talking about like profitability in a nonprofit. If you could just give her some wisdom, because that's a different path, but it's a profitable path.
Okay, so Kim, first of all, we went into a lot more detail on a lot more things, so you'll have that video. But just quickly, we thought a nonprofit would be a great way for you because it would give you some credibility. But one thing we want to make sure is that you understand that you can pay yourself a good salary as a nonprofit. And I'm sure you've already thought of this. I'm not sure why you haven't gone with it, but you can pay yourself a lot of money. You can create a massive, massive platform. You can bring in experts. You can provide services. You can do research as a think tank arm. You can go into different countries. You can create a documentary, you can do, I mean, all kinds of things under that lens. And one thing that I want to say to you is that even though you don't have this credential, there's still so much that you can do, and you can borrow other people's credentials, right? You can bring in a resident expert, right? You can do a lot of different things. And
Hmm.
you can raise money from grants, but you can also raise money from the public, right? Any human being hearing this will want to support this cause, right? But agencies, they're afraid of liability and risk and litigation and loss and, you know, in harm or threat to their structure. But human beings hearing this will contribute.
Can you speak into my resistance around finding a group of people for a board that is going to be like-minded, to where I feel like I'm not losing my mission of the type of love and care I want to give these women?
Okay, so first of all, when you create the board, you want some people who are sort of in that headspace with you, but you also want some people who the mission almost doesn't matter, that they have some management skills, they have some practical skills in running a big business, how to run the numbers, how to raise funds. Some of the people you want to be mission people. You will find them, and as your confidence grows, you can start having conversations and looking for the credentials that you need. You don't just need people to be like, oh, that's a great idea. Because if they don't have any skills, you don't need them on your board.
That's awesome. Christy, do you want to say anything before we close?
Just know that you're this, there might come a point when this is going to feel extremely overwhelming. But you're absolutely right. This is your purpose. This is what you're supposed to do. And you need to bring a big flashlight into a really, really big, dark place. But you got this. You got this.
Thank you.
I'm telling you, I can see it. This is yours. This is you. Thank you from all of us.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Donnie?
So there are a couple of elements. The last thing that I told the group before we brought you back in is unleash the beast.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Because we really see you being this go-to place for post-adoption healing. But on the other side of that, there's also joy restoration. And I think it's going to be really important as you think about the journey that you take with your community is, yes, we help you with post-adoption healing, but also we help you begin to think about, what does joy look like now, or how do I even think about
Very
that
important.
and reorient to that.
Mhm.
So let that continue to guide you as you really help people through their time of need.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Kim.
Thank you all for giving up your time today and helping there.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. So I'll get you the 30-day, it's more than 30 days, but we did a comprehensive document for you. I'll send
Okay.
that over to you this morning, and then we'll get the recording to you.
Thanks so much. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.